All right, buckle up, because things are about to get weird.
Oh, yeah.
Today, we're going deep
Deep.
into the mind of one of the most fascinating, and let's face it, slightly unhinged artists of all time.
Definitely unhinged.
Salvador Dalí.
One of the greats.
We're talking about the man who made melting clocks a global phenomenon.
Yeah. You know the one.
You've definitely seen The Persistence of Memory.
Oh, for sure.
It might be the single most iconic surrealist painting ever.
Top 3 at least.
But I think we want to go beyond just recognizing the image.
Definitely.
We want to understand the why.
Absolutely.
What's with the melting clocks?
Yeah. And that trippy landscape.
Well, lucky for you, we did the research.
We dove deep into the sources.
So we could decode this dreamscape for you.
And trust me.
It's even weirder than you think.
Much weirder.
But before we get lost in Dali's melting world.
Yeah, good point.
Maybe a little Surrealism 101.
Surrealism 101.
For those of us who haven't spent much time in the subconscious lately.
Right. Think of surrealism as art's rebellion against reason.
Okay.
It's all about tapping into dreams. The subconscious, the irrational.
So basically everything your therapist tells you to avoid.
Exactly.
It's like they took those bizarre, illogical dreams we all have.
Yep.
And instead of waking up in a cold sweat,
right,
they decided to paint them.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it wasn't just about throwing random images together.
No, not at all.
There's a method to the madness.
Absolutely a method to the madness.
And the Surrealists were all about expressing the subconscious mind visually.
Yes.
They believed that by tapping into this hidden realm,
right,
they could unlock these new levels of creativity.
Oh, yeah.
And understanding.
That was the goal.
Which makes sense.
It does.
But let's be honest.
Okay.
No one embodies that method to the madness quite like Dalí.
Oh, he was the king of that.
This guy was next level eccentric.
Next level.
Even for a surrealist.
Oh, yeah. Even for a surrealist.
I mean, he was a master of self-promotion.
Oh, he knew how to work a crowd.
A showman who understood the power of spectacle.
Definitely.
And that mustache.
Don't even get me started.
That handlebar mustache.
It was like a weapon.
A weapon of mass distraction.
Sam.
And then...
Oh, yeah. Then there's
his infamous paranoid critical method.
Now that's where things get really interesting.
So basically, he would deliberately induce hallucinations to fuel his creativity.
To fuel his art.
He was trying to access a state of controlled delirium.
Yes.
Using sleep deprivation.
Sleep deprivation.
Sensory overload.
All kinds of things.
Even hunger. To blur the lines between reality and hallucination.
To break down those barriers.
So he wasn't just painting his dreams.
No.
He was practically living in them.
That's the key.
And this is how he tapped into those deepest recesses of his subconscious.
Yes.
To bring the irrational to life on canvas.
Exactly.
And that's what we see in The Persistence of Memory.
It's not just a random collection of weird images.
Yeah.
It's a carefully constructed dreamscape.
Okay.
And it's designed to evoke
what?
This specific feeling.
Yeah.
A specific state of mind.
Okay, I think my mind is already halfway melted.
Oh, yeah.
Just thinking about it.
I feel you.
So let's just break this dreamscape down.
Okay, what do you want to start with?
We've got those infamous melting clocks.
Of course.
Ants swarming everywhere.
Classic Dalí.
And is that a melted face?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here.
Where do we even begin?
How about those clocks?
Okay, the clock?
It's tempting to just see them as this representation of time being fluid.
Right.
But it's more than that.
Okay, more than that.
Remember we talked about how Dalí was fascinated by the subconscious?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
He believed that time, as we perceive it, is a construct of the conscious mind.
I'm following.
But in the subconscious, time is malleable.
Malleable.
It stretches. It distorts.
It distorts. Just like those clocks.
So it's not just about time being fluid.
No.
It's about challenging our whole concept of time.
You got it.
Dalí is saying time isn't this rigid, linear thing that we experience in our waking lives.
Right.
It's something more subjective.
Yes.
Much more malleable.
Much more.
Especially when we enter the realm of dreams.
Yes.
And the subconscious.
Dreams and the subconscious.
Okay. I'm starting to get a headache.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a good headache, I think.
It's a good headache.
What about those ants?
The ants.
They always creep me out a little.
I get it.
What are they all about?
Well, ants were a recurring motif in Dalí's work.
Okay.
And they often represented
decay and anxiety.
And anxiety.
And remember, he was really interested in the subconscious, and anxiety is
a powerful
force in that hidden realm.
So the ants are like a visual representation of those anxieties that nibble away at us in the back of our minds.
That's it.
And they're soaring over the clocks.
They are.
Which kind of emphasizes this idea of time as a source of anxiety.
Time is anxiety.
Something that consumes everything.
It consumes.
Erodes everything in its path.
That's how he saw it.
All right. That's officially enough to give me nightmares.
I told you, it gets weird.
So what about that weird blob in the middle of the painting? Is that supposed to be a face?
Well, it's probably a self-portrait.
A self-portrait.
Or at least a representation of Dalí himself.
Okay.
Remember, he was obsessed with the idea of the self?
Okay.
And how it gets distorted.
And
fragmented.
It's in the subconscious.
So even his self-image. Is melting in this dreamscape.
It is.
Classic Dalí.
It all comes back to the subconscious.
It really does.
It's a visual representation of how our identities become fluid. In the realm of dreams.
Yes.
We lose our sense of solidity.
We do.
Our sense of self.
And we become something else.
Something else entirely.
Exactly.
And what about that landscape in the background?
The landscape.
Those cliffs look strangely familiar.
They do.
Like I've seen them before.
Well, you might have.
Really?
They're inspired by the Cap de Creus Peninsula.
The Cap de Creus Peninsula.
Catalonia. It's where Dalí lived and worked.
Wow.
He had this deep personal connection to the landscape.
Okay.
And it shows up a lot in his paintings.
Interesting.
It clearly meant something to him.
So even in this surreal dreamscape, there's a grounding element of reality.
That's right. And I think that contrast is important.
The contrast.
Yeah, it highlights the tension between the rational world of waking life and the irrational world of the subconscious.
Interesting.
The cliffs represent the permanence of the external world.
Okay.
And the melting clocks and distorted figures.
Yeah.
They represent the fluidity and impermanence.
The impermanence.
Of our inner world.
Our inner world.
It's like Dalí's saying.
What's he saying?
Even in this melting, dreamlike world, there's still this solid, unchanging reality out there. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not.
Okay, so we've talked about the meaning.
Right, all that symbolism.
But how did he even paint this thing?
Good question.
I mean, how do you even paint melting clocks?
That's where Dalí's technical brilliance comes in.
Really?
He wasn't just a visionary. He was a master craftsman.
Okay.
He used techniques from the Renaissance masters.
Like who?
Especially their use of light and shadow.
Light and shadow.
To create depth and realism.
So even though the subject matter is completely bonkers.
Yeah, totally out there.
The actual execution.
The painting itself.
Is super precise.
Very precise. Look at the way the light hits those clocks.
Okay.
The way the shadows create volume and texture.
Yeah.
It's like he's illuminating the subconscious.
With a spotlight.
With a spotlight, exactly.
You know, it's those little details that really get under your skin.
They do.
The way the paint seems to drip, the textures.
Almost hyper-realistic textures.
Yeah, it's unsettlingly convincing.
Right.
Like it should be a photo.
And that was his goal.
It was.
He wasn't just trying to shock you with weird images.
Right.
He wanted to draw you into this world.
Into this dreamlike world.
To make you question your own perception of reality.
Whoa.
And that takes serious skill.
Okay, so we've unpacked the symbolism.
We have.
Explored the technique.
Yes.
Delved into Dalí's unique creative process.
That's one way to put it.
But why does this painting even matter?
Why does it matter?
Yeah, why is it still so captivating?
Almost 100 years later.
Nearly a century later.
It's more than just a painting.
Okay.
It's a mirror.
A mirror.
It's reflecting our deepest anxieties.
Oh,
our fascinations.
Our fascinations.
It speaks to our fear of time slipping away.
Oh, yeah.
Our obsession with the subconscious, our desire to understand reality itself.
It's like he's holding up this melting clock.
Yeah.
And saying, hey, time is doing this to all of us.
To all of us.
Whether we admit it or not.
That's the point.
And it's not just about time.
Right. It's bigger than that.
It's about the fragility of memory.
The fragility of memory.
How our perceptions can shift and distort.
Shift and distort.
The idea that reality itself might be more fluid than we like to believe.
That's the unsettling part.
Okay, mind officially blown.
I know, right?
But here's something that's always bugged me.
What's that?
Dalí said he got the idea for the melting clocks.
Yeah.
From watching camembert cheese soften in the sun.
I've heard that.
Seriously, cheese.
Cheese. That's it.
Well, that was Dalí.
Uh-huh.
Always finding the profound in the mundane.
Yeah, but cheese.
Cheese.
I don't know. But I think there's something to it.
Like what?
Like time.
Okay.
Something we think of as solid.
Solid.
Unchanging.
Right, unchanging.
But under the right conditions.
Yeah. It transforms.
It melts.
It becomes something else entirely.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
It's about transformation.
So he's saying that even the things we think are fixed, unchanging, are actually subject to these forces.
The forces of time.
Of time and decay.
Exactly.
It's that tension between permanence and impermanence.
That's what makes this painting so powerful.
Wow.
It really makes you think.
Hold on. I thought we were talking about one painting.
Oh.
You mentioned another one earlier.
I did.
Something about disintegration.
Yeah. Years later, Dalí revisited this whole theme.
Of the melting clocks?
The persistence of memory.
In another painting?
Yes.
Called The Disintegration of the Persistence of Memory?
What? It's like a sequel.
A sequel.
But for art.
But for art.
He went back to these ideas.
Okay.
But with this darker, more fragmented perspective.
Fragmented?
In this later work.
Okay.
The melting clocks are broken down.
Broken down.
Almost atomized into these strange abstract forms.
So if the first painting is about time melting away.
Right.
What happens when it completely disintegrates?
That's the question.
What's left?
What's left?
That's a good question.
And I think it's even more relevant today.
How so?
We live in a world where information overload.
An information overload.
Rapid technological change. This constant sense of uncertainty.
Yeah.
It's made reality itself feel fragmented.
Fragmented.
More disjointed.
It's like we're all living in Dalí's disintegrated dreamscape now.
Maybe we are.
Oh, wow.
But maybe
what?
Instead of fearing that disintegration, we can embrace it.
Embrace it.
Use it as an opportunity.
To do what?
To question our assumption.
Oh, an assumption.
To explore new ways of seeing the world.
New ways of seeing the world.
New ways of understanding it.
To find the beauty in the broken clocks.
You got it.
To see the potential for renewal and transformation.
In the very act of disintegration.
I like that.
And that is the ultimate legacy of the persistence of memory.
All right. I'm officially feeling both enlightened.
Enlightened.
And slightly disturbed.
Slightly disturbed.
But in a good way.
That's the Dalí effect.
It is. He makes you think.
He does.
Making you question.
He makes you question.
And he leaves you with this lingering sense of unease.
You just can't shake it.
You can't shake it.
I think I need a nap.
Maybe you do.
Preferably one without melting clocks.
Without melting clocks.
And giant ants.
Definitely no ants.
Yeah. Let your subconscious process all this strangeness.
That's a good idea.
We'll pick up the conversation next time.
We'll be back.
Back in my nap.
Refreshed and ready to go.
No melting clocks in sight, thankfully.
That's good to hear.
But I'm still thinking about that question.
Which one?
What does all this Dalí weirdness mean for us?
The big question.
The non-surrealist folks.
All right.
Just trying to navigate everyday reality.
Yeah.
That is the million-dollar question.
It is.
I think Dalí's offering is a challenge.
Okay, a challenge.
Not just a visual spectacle.
More than just melting clocks.
Exactly. He's asking us to question our assumptions.
About
time, about reality.
About the nature of our own perceptions.
All of that.
So instead of freaking out about melting clocks and distorted faces.
Right. Instead of panicking.
We should be using them as a springboard.
Yes.
For some deep introspection.
That's the idea.
So take those melting clocks, for example.
Okay, the melting clocks.
They're not just a random visual quirk.
No, they're a symbol of how our perception of time is constantly shifting.
Especially in today's world.
Today's fast-paced world.
I mean, who hasn't felt like time is slipping away?
At warp speed.
Deadlines, social media, the news cycle.
It's relentless.
It's enough to make anyone's clog melt.
I know the feeling.
So Dalí's saying this feeling of time distortion isn't new.
Not at all.
It's something humans have always struggled with. It's just become more pronounced now.
In our modern age.
Okay, so what's the solution?
The solution.
Do we just give up and let our clocks melt?
Into a puddle of existential angst?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay, so what do we do?
I think Dalí's suggesting, instead of trying to control time,
right,
we need to learn to embrace its fluidity.
Embrace the fluidity of time.
To recognize that our experience of time
is
subjective.
Subjective.
It's shaped by our emotions, our memories, our perspectives.
That's actually kind of liberating.
It is.
Maybe those deadlines aren't so terrifying after all.
Maybe you just need another nap.
Maybe I do need another nap.
But seriously,
yeah.
I think the key takeaway here is that Dalí's work,
Dali's work.
It invites us to engage with the world differently.
Differently.
To look beyond the surface.
Okay, beyond the surface.
To question our assumptions.
Question our assumptions.
And to find meaning in the unexpected.
To embrace the weirdness. Because in a world that often feels absurd and chaotic.
In a world like ours.
Maybe a little surrealism is exactly what we need.
Maybe we all need a little Dalí.
To make sense of it all.
To see things differently.
Well, I think we've officially cracked the code on this dreamscape.
We did our best.
Or at least we've melted our brains enough trying.
That's what happens when you go deep with Dalí.
And that's the beauty of Dalí.
It is.
He never gives you all the answers.
No.
But he leaves you with a whole lot of questions.
Questions to ponder.
So for all of you out there listening.
Yes, everyone listening.
We want to know, what did you see in Dalí's melting world?
What did you see?
Any hidden meanings? Any personal connections?
Share your thoughts.
Let us know, because the conversation doesn't end here.
And if you're feeling adventurous,
if you're up for the challenge,
check out Dalí's later work.
That sequel.
The disintegration of the persistence of memory.
Okay.
It takes all these themes we've discussed and pushes them even further.
Even further.
Exploring the fragmentation of time and reality.
Mind-bending stuff.
It's really something.
Consider it a homework assignment for your subconscious.
Homework for the subconscious.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning.
And remember,
yes,
sometimes the most profound truths are hidden.
Hidden where?
In the melting cheese of life.
In the melting cheese of life.